Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom. This is Naaman. I'm back again here in DC with the Great Millstone Camp here. Back for another video. First and foremost, call by Hashem Yahushua, by Hashem Rakah Hakwadash, and of course, double honors once again go out to the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Salutations go out to the fellow Akim that are out there, all right, week in and week out, out here on the highways and byways, all right, pushing the truth throughout the four corners of this earth, all the while aided, of course, with the many, many videos that are uploaded. And this is, of course, we do for the edification of the hopeful elect of our people and trying to wake them up. All right, here's the copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research, all of which I am doing. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statutes that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. All right, fair use, fair use, fair use. All right, so lately there's been a lot of goings on in regard to the 14th Amendment. Now, we all know that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, all right, were expressly designed to benefit the descendants of slaves, all right? But everyone has used the 14th Amendment. Well, let me rephrase that. Other people are allowed to misuse, all right, to misuse the 14th Amendment. And you have to understand that the Democratic Party, who hates us, all right, as much, if not more, than the Republican Party. We've often told you that neither of these parties have our best interest at heart. All right, they're just as much so-called white supremacists as the hardcore Republicans. All right, and I got to bring it up, but the person that explained this the best as was Malcolm X when he used the analogy about the wolf and the fox. The fox, of course, being the Democrats like to hug up to you and rub shoulders with you, but all the while they got that knife. All right, can't wait to stab you in the back. All right, and this, of course, I still not convinced that our people or enough of our people see it. All right, but enough to where it caused concern. All right, with the Democratic Party because they were trying to, as Dr. Claude Anderson told you back in the 90s with his Powernomics when he was going around the country. He was trying to tell you, hey, these people coming over here, they're not your friends. All right, they're coming to replace us. All right, and again, these people are allowed to do this because they don't have the history. All right, they don't have the history like we do with these people. So they're trying to I don't want to say sweep it under the rug. They're trying to, hey, displace us to where we're no longer relevant politically, or especially politically, but otherwise. He's like, don't you see? All right. And this is something, again, in his Powernomics. He was talking about, hey, if you're not getting what you should, being number two, all right, as far, well, really number three now, getting ready to be four on the list. What do you think you're going to get at 3 and 4? All right, because hey, by numbers, the Northern Kingdom has displaced us, and their attitudes is such that hey, they even had lawsuits back in the 30s and 40s to try to say that they were white. So you know what they feel about us, even though we here know that hey, you know, you got to understand that a lot of them have probably been bred out because of the history with the conquistadors and the Edomites down and around there in South America. So, and that goes to you can't always tell by color; it's the spirit. All right. But in any case, yeah, these people. I mean, you got your Caribbeans and you have your Africans. They come over here. They don't have the history with America like we do. So of course, especially when they get into political office, who do you think? All right, they're going to strive to serve, not us. Of course, they're going to vote no on reparations. But again, they're being allowed to do this. This is another kick in the face, kick in the nuts, kick in the face to us. This is they're showing you how much they hate us by allowing this. Like you could go to another country, all right, and be eligible to vote. All right, and dabble in the affairs of the locals. See? So this is what a lot of people are really fucking tired of now. And he's going to go into this and, he's going to have to explain some things because she's a little impatient sometimes, but she'll come around and get it. But they're trying to cloak themselves in our history like the gays did. All right. And hopefully you'll see my point. So let's go ahead and get to the video.
On April the 1st.
April Fool's Day.
Yeah. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments for more than 2 hours, probing whether President Donald Trump had violated the Constitution with his order restricting birthright citizenship. The case, Trump versus Barber, focuses on a portion of the 14th Amendment known as the Citizenship Clause that says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of.
And let me say this, all right, before it gets too far. I have been for the longest time not trying to get caught up in this diaspora war bullshit. This is not why I'm doing the video, all right? What it appears is going on here is they're actually trying to go after Gad too. Because everybody thought, well, hey, Gad, or AKA the so-called North American Indian, hey, they've been here, right? But as you're going to find out, it may not be as secure a thing as everybody thought.
Of the state wherein they reside. Now,
you want an analysis of what was going on?
Well, here's the thing. I do have some clips that I want to play, and of course, have you back or explain to us what the justices were saying. I have some of those clips, but go ahead and give us your.
Here's what I'd say before you play the clips. It's this. One of the things about law is what happens ultimately may depend simply upon the order you present certain things. And I think the presentation on behalf of the Trump administration was very well prepared. The general that had the case and argued it, the guy with the very gravelly voice, he had a very thorough grasp of his case.
For those of you that don't know, just put it out there. I'm not trying to insult anybody. What he's talking about, the Solicitor General argues on behalf of the United States when they go to the Supreme Court.
And he was citing page numbers and paragraphs and et cetera, from memory, not from notes.
Oh, boy.
And that was impressive. The main problem that I saw with this case, and you should listen to what you are going to hear, is that everything that the respondents, that is the people who had won below and gotten court action to stop what Trump has been trying to do. Their thing is that they cited a lot of case and precedent that depended upon the people initially being here in the country on a lawful basis. Typically, the case came about because a visa expired or some technicality put them in a situation, or nobody was contending that they had snuck across the border, so to speak. And with that consideration, we can hear all of the rest of it, and I'll get into an analysis of the case after we played your clips.
Justice Jackson?
So I want to understand how you are responding to the government's argument that because temporary visitors and undocumented immigrants are still governed by their home countries, and in the government's take on this, you can't have allegiance to two different sovereigns. Those groups can't have the requisite allegiance to be subject to the United States for the purpose of the 14th Amendment. That's what I hear the government saying, but I do think that that seems to rest on a different understanding of allegiance than what was in the English common law, and that when we understand what the English common law thought about allegiance, you can see that you can have allegiance to two different sovereigns at the same time. This kind of goes back to Justice Alito's questions. I mean, I was thinking about this, and I think there are various sources that say this, that you obviously have permanent allegiance based on being born in whatever country you're from. That's what everybody recognizes. But you also have local allegiance when you are on the soil of this other sovereign. And I was thinking, I'm a U.S. citizen and visiting Japan. And what it means is that, if I steal someone's wallet in Japan, the Japanese authorities can arrest me and prosecute me. It's allegiance, meaning can they control you as a matter of law. I can also rely on them if my wallet is stolen to, under Japanese law, go and prosecute the person who has stolen it. So there's this relationship based on, even though I'm a temporary traveler, I'm just on vacation in Japan, I'm still locally owing allegiance in that sense. Is that the right way to think about it? And if so, doesn't that explain why both temporary residents and undocumented people would have that kind of quote-unquote allegiance just by virtue of being in the United States?
That's absolutely right, Justice Jackson, and that comports with the plain text of the 14th Amendment as it applies to everyone born in the United States other than those subject to the exceptions that were baked in, a close set. You owe natural allegiance as a U.S. born citizen. If you want to look at the parents of those people, and let's say the parents are foreign nationals but not ambassadors, the parents owe temporary allegiance.
Right, so the babies get the permanent allegiance piece of this, and the parents get the local allegiance piece of this. So to the extent we're looking for allegiance, we have it.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay, can we stop right here? With due respect to her honor, she irritates me when I hear her. That's not what you're supposed to get from a Supreme Court justice. Here's what they're talking about. Let's hypothetically imagine there's a declared war going on, okay? You have somebody that is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That is, they owe allegiance to the United States of America. And you have another person who is a spy or a special operative or something for a foreign entity, meaning one that we declared war on. And that person gets in a rubber boat after launching from a submarine, paddles ashore, and infiltrates into the country. He blows something up that is a vital defense installation, and he escapes back to his home country. You can't come in at a later date and try this guy for treason. But if an American subject to the jurisdiction of the United States States commits the same act, that is, blows up a vital defense installation, you can try him for treason. If you catch the spy who blew it up and he's inside the United States when you catch him, you can try him as a spy, put him on the wall, and shoot him. If he escapes and gets back to his own country, you can't go after him after the war for blowing up that installation, because that is a legitimate act of war and he owes no allegiance to the United States of America. The thing subject to the jurisdiction of the United States is this: a Native American off the reservation in the 19th century could run into the U.S. Cavalry, the U.S. Marshal, the local sheriff, and get treated in a certain kind of way. But if he's on the reservation, he's not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. He's subject to the jurisdiction of that tribe and that reservation. You get the distinction? And that's what's going on. The other thing here that is basically left untouched to a great extent on behalf of the people who are promoting wide open borders is that there is a conflation of the rights of a child with those of the parent. Now, technically, the issue could be resolved very simply, but it is ruthless, it's cold-blooded, and it disregards a lot of humanitarian considerations. But I've done it myself from the bench in circumstances. Imagine, if you would, you have a mother, and she's been convicted of an armed robbery, and somebody is shot. Several people have been shot during the course of the armed robbery, and the jury sentences her, doesn't sentence her, they find her guilty of robbery with a deadly weapon, or in this case, especially aggravated robbery. She's in front of me, and this has actually happened. And the sentencing guidelines establish, without any aggravation, a minimum sentence of 25 years in the penitentiary. Well, she has a child. So, as actually happened, she's saying, you can't sentence me to a penitentiary, judge. Who's going to take care of my child? I don't have any relatives. Well, unfortunately for the child, the response is that does not matter. You're going to the penitentiary. You broke the law, and the court will see that the Department of Human Services becomes involved and finds a foster situation for your child. You should have thought about that when you committed the crime. So what actually should happen technically is that the child should be retained as a U.S. citizen, put in a foster care situation, and the mother or the parents deported. Or you can give them a choice. Take your child and you submit to the deportation, and you can retain your family unit. Otherwise, you will be deported and your child will remain here. An interesting illustration of the problem that nobody talked about is this one. No, I won't give the illustration, but here's the other point. When you talked about the slaves, one of the things that came up as a result of the Dred Scott decision, which is why we have this 14th Amendment provision, which was to get rid of the Dred Scott decision, which was still valid American law at the time, but it was a horrible one and it led to the Civil War to a certain extent. And that is this: the slaves that got brought over after 1806 were brought over illegally, because the slave trade, as per the Constitution itself, between Africa and the United States was to stop in 1806 or thereabouts. So, what happened with these people who got brought over from Africa after that point and had been held in slavery? Did this provision apply to them? And it was held that yes, the provisions of the 14th Amendment did apply to them. But the distinction is again, the person to whom the provision applied broke no laws. He was the victim of an illegality. So, what would happen is if somebody got brought over against their will, let's say kidnapped and brought over by one of the cartels that is operating here, and sex trafficked, then she would not have these considerations in the Trump administration's position that would apply to her because she did not commit any wrong. Somebody else did, and she's essentially a real live victim. So, what would happen in this situation? Let's suppose you have a minor child who has been kidnapped and then smuggled into the country by one of the cartels and has been sex trafficked. She gets pregnant and this minor has a child. What would happen is that a totally different situation would apply because that child would be a U.S. citizen and considerations as to her circumstances would apply to the minor parent who, through no fault of her own, got kidnapped and brought over here. The reason that becomes important, and it was not mentioned by anybody, is that there is an old U.S. Supreme Court decision that backs up an old principle of law.
I have more clips.
Here's one more thing. It's crime should not pay. So what is being advocated by the people who want the open border is they want to set up a big neon sign that says, come on in, crime pays. If you can beat the system, then we'll make you a citizen. That's your test.
Exactly, and at whose expense?
Violate the law and see if you can get away with it. And that's effectively what the people are pushing for who want open borders. And you cannot have that. And the other thing that feeds off of that, which is known as the Wong Sun Doctrine or the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, which is a long established precedent by the U.S. Supreme Court. It says if what you're trying to do follows from doing a wrong, you cannot prevail. And it comes from San Francisco, like most of the cases that the people who want open border cite.
You see how convoluted all this shit is? Here it is. They set up laws talking about you can't benefit from from wrongdoing, and this whole country was established that way. All right.
And what that is the person broke the law, is illegally in the United States, but wants to take advantage of the U.S. law that was set up by the clear legislative history for the benefit of former slaves and say, I broke the law, but because I got happy, flat back, spread, gapped, and got knocked up and had a child, then I want to be made a full-fledged citizen. Well, you wouldn't have gotten knocked up and been here if you had not broke the law. So that is the poisonous tree that got planted. So anything that flows out of that has to be disallowed. Now, another thing that you're not going to have in that clip is this. There are some Chinese concerns that advertised vacations in America for pregnant women so they could come over here and have their children in the United States so their children could claim citizenship and be dual citizens of China and the United States, which for the long term political, military, and diplomatic purposes of China would have somebody with a dual citizenship status and would set up sleeper cells or sleeper agents for long term usage. Now, that's not discussed, but that's a reality. And nobody mentioned that the circumstances have changed and that right now, what used to be a little trickle.
Now, what country comes to mind when you think of something like that? It's not China. Could it be Israel? Maybe that's not why they want to discuss it too much. Especially now, because that's going to come up. I guarantee it. In light of what's going on. All right. Uh, Governor DeSantis down in Florida just passed. They just passed some legislation about declaring some of these organizations as terrorist groups. All right, and this is probably going to spread, and it's all because of them folks over there. All right, but you're seeing that and we're gonna get into to Gad, uh, because in a roundabout way it seems like they're going after Gad too, because they're trying to say that you know they are not recognized as American citizens. I'm like, well, wait, is this the language in the law that's being used? But we'll get to it.
Or something way back when 150 years ago is now a large scale thing in a world environment that severely compromises the national security. So, yeah, with that said, let's get into the clips you have, which will be little bitty pieces of the big picture.
Thank you, Counsel. Justice Thomas, anything further, Justice Alito?
Well, just a couple more questions. So if those who framed and adopted the 14th Amendment had wanted to limit the citizenship test to just those specific groups that you concede fall outside the birthright citizenship rule, why didn't they refer specifically to those groups? Why didn't they adopt a general rule? They could have said all persons born or naturalized in the United States, excluding Indians not taxed, and those ineligible under common law are citizens of the United States and of the state
Indians
wherein
not
they reside.
taxed.
Or they could have said all persons born or naturalized in the United States, excluding Indians not taxed, and the children of foreign ambassadors or foreign invaders are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. But they didn't do that. They adopted a general rule. So what's the explanation?
I would say the Wong Kim Ark tells us what the explanation is, that the framers of the 14th Amendment, after overriding President Johnson's veto, wanted to adopt a universal rule with a closed set of exceptions. And they
President Johnson. That's Andrew Johnson, who was vice president under Lincoln. And after he was assassinated, of course, he became president. And he was an avowed racist. And what I mean avowed, I mean declared openly. Everybody knew it. And he was for the South. All right. And that's why, even though that what's greatly misunderstood in that 40 acre and a mule, that was never actually, I believe that was General Sherman. Actually came from another one. Oh, where was it? Had something to do with Missouri. I can't remember his name, but actually Lincoln, oh, around 1862. I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. What was the general's name? McClellan? I can't remember it now, but he's the first one to actually coin that phrase. And then with Sherman, the outer, what was it? I almost said Outer Banks, but down in the Carolinas, those, I guess it was Gullah, those peoples, you're talking about it being specifically for those peoples and that area down there off the coast. That was not meant for everyone because at the time, not everyone, as far as the slaves were concerned, was free. All right, and that's where everybody gets, oh, it's 40 acres, and this place is never was never going to do us right. All right, so it's like me personally, I always say, why even bother? That's just false hope, and these people are just wicked. They're evil. And hey, Psalms 43 and 1. This is who you're dealing with. As soon as I get it here. Oh, crap. Sometimes I just hate this app. Hold on. Because it gets hung up just like that. And I didn't even see it initially. I'm waiting for it to load. Thought it had loaded. All right, let's go to Psalms 43 and 1. This is one of my favorites because this is who you're dealing with. Why are you burdening? It's like wasted mental energy. All right, this is Psalms 43 and 1. Judge me, O Most High, and plead my cause. All right, this is what we say. Against an ungodly nation, nation of Edom. All right. Oh, deliver me from the deceitful and unjust man. What has he really done that's been of any substance? Up until this day. It's just not been, oh, we'll give you a holiday. Oh, some other fucked up shit that really doesn't mean anything. It's not going to, as another expression, high tide lifts all boats. Of course, the most fucked up thing that ever happened was we agreeing to this civil rights bullshit, which I come to understand wasn't the actual purpose of it. Because you got to remember, years before that era started, what he's talking about, Dred Scott, and then under Jim Crow, you had this supposed to be separate but equal, and it was far from it. That was the push, but again, the scripture I just read, Psalms 43 and 1, who's the fool for thinking that they were going to be true to their word in anything? It's too late now to realize that, hey, things should have stayed as they were. All right, because, hey, we were forced to be self-sufficient. This is what you get. There's a scripture that talks about the beggar. Where is that? The beggar's life. It's in Sirach. Let's see. Let me make sure I got the right. Nope. Glad I thought about that. I had the right Bible open. Let's see. Beggar's life. And essentially, that's the role that, all right, we were suckered into agreeing to. Beggar's life. Where is that? Did I spell it right? Huh. I'll read the, okay. It was, okay, that had me the, spelling does make a difference, even with, let's see. Be not made a beggar by banqueting upon borrowing. Remember the curse we're under. All right, Sirach 28 and 48. We got to go to this degenerate piece of shit for everything and all things. That was the curse poured upon us. It says, be not made a beggar by banqueting upon borrowing when thou hast nothing in thy purse, for thou shalt lie in wait for thine own life and be talked on. Is that not the case? Welfare. And we know who's the biggest recipient of welfare. But again, that talked on point. Here's Sirach 40 and 28. My son, lead not a beggar's life, for better it is to die than to beg. This is the trap, all right. This is the pit, the system, all right, that we're in. All right, it's like that line in Full Metal Jacket when the lieutenant is telling Private Joker. He's like, this is a huge shit sandwich that we're forced to take a bite out of. All right, this is, wow. Whew. Back to the video.
Believed that subject to the jurisdiction of the United States did that. And that term does describe both the universal general rule and the common law exceptions, with the sole additional American exception for tribal Indians.
Thank you.
Okay, now, a little explanation as to what you heard. That was a sophisticated trap for the attorney who responded to it. It sounded like he was trying to help her out.
Well, I mean,
Okay, but it was not. It's not a long explanation. It was a trap. He said, this is probably what you're going to want to rely upon. What do you have to say about it? And what she said about it did not overcome what has already been argued and is in those briefs. So go ahead.
everything you say strikes me as, yeah, that's the way I read it too. But then what are those 20 domicile words doing there? Like, you can, take some of them and say, they were just summarizing the facts of the case, but not all of them. And why did they keep on, why did they sprinkle that in the opinion?
Well, I think, again, those were the stipulated facts in the case, and it's clear we have textual evidence in the majority opinion that they were simply saying this is an a fortiori application of that controlling rule that comes from the English common law. Justice Gray writes, again, after setting out the English common law rule and the exceptions, with the single additional exception for children of members of
Remember that
Indian
word,
tribes,
domicile.
that the amendment in clear words and manifest intent includes the children born within the territory of the United States of all other persons of whatever race or color domiciled within the United States. And as was pointed out earlier, the very next part of that same paragraph, he cites to Webster talking about Thrasher's case, and he says, people who are born in this country owe allegiance independently of residence within, foreign nationals owe allegiance independently of a residence with intention to continue such residence, independently of any domiciliation, and independently of taking any oath of allegiance, which is totally contrary to both the government's theory of dual allegiance or partial allegiance and to the theory of domiciliation.
If you need to record anything over the internet, I cannot think of a more seamless way.
Ms. Wang, I've not quite understood the Solicitor General's argument that lawful domicile somehow changes the U.S.'s dominion over a person or allegiance. Even in Justice Alito's examples, if your parents are Iranian, if you get lawful permanent residency here, that child still, by their laws, when it leaves the United States, must serve in the Iranian army, correct?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. What I can tell you is that under Wong Kim Ark, the court says, we don't care about problems of dual nationality. We don't look to other countries' laws in construing our 14th Amendment.
Well, it was undisputed there that Wong Kim Ark's parents owed loyalties to China, correct?
Sure, yes.
What I'm saying is, even if you become a permanent resident, you're not a U.S. citizen. So your primary loyalty still remains with your citizenship country, wherever you came from.
That's right, Justice Sotomayor. I take your point now.
You understand what I'm saying. And during temporary, whether it's lawful or unlawful, temporary presence in the United States, you are subject to the U.S. laws, correct?
That's right. The question that the 14th Amendment asks is whether the U.S.-born child is subject to U.S. jurisdiction when they're born.
Meaning, are they within the U.S. territory?
Exactly, other than people covered by that closed set of exceptions.
Okay, thank you.
That's right. In other words, the government's rule, which really is looking at whether someone has a divided allegiance because they're a citizen of another country, would exclude the children of all foreign nationals, and that isn't what they're saying.
Exactly. And so the only way that allegiance, lawful or unlawful, has no play in this question.
I would say that the relevance of allegiance is the relevance under the English common law rule that's embodied in the 14th Amendment. All persons born in the territory of the sovereign owe natural allegiance.
English common law. Interesting. Very interesting.
Except for the three limited exceptions.
Precisely.
Okay, see, here we go again with this failure to distinguish between the child and the parent. It's like this. If I could give you a more concise example than anybody has given. Let's suppose that we re-implemented the draft. Is the child that we're talking about subject to the draft once they hit 18? Answer, probably yes. Is the parent of the child subject to being drafted, 18, 30, 40, 45, whatever it may be? No. So that becomes the problem. Again, nobody was talking about the issue of distinguishing the citizenship of the child versus the imputed citizenship of the parent. See, what they're trying to do with this one is birthright citizenship is being attacked primarily, but it's an avenue to get at granting citizenship to people who have the child on the U.S. property or territory. And that's where we get into here. This is, I guess you could say, poor drafting on everybody's part. In other words, how they wrote it up and how they presented it. But it's an issue that presents itself on examination of the whole situation. Are we going to grant the parents a citizenship status because they get knocked up or are knocked up and have a child here? And that is why we have this concept called the anchor baby. What is the impact of the anchor baby on the whole thing? Because technically, we could just say, we are keeping your child by, we're throwing you out. This is a citizen. We're not going to let this American citizen, who could be drafted maybe in the future and be a resource to the U.S. military, and as an interest of the country, we don't want taken back to a totalitarian regime where they will be deprived of all of the rights because of where they will be compelled to live that a U.S. citizen would enjoy. Or give them the option I suggested, you take your child and you go, or we keep the child and you go. And that's what...
And that was actually presented, what Trump and his administration did by saying, hey, if you deport yourself, we'll give you $1,000, and, go your way. So that option was presented.
Nobody wants to talk about because that is offensive to a lot of people. Oh my God, it's inhumane, but so is crashing the border. And by the way, domicile is where you intend to lawfully live. Okay. And if you have invaded, you haven't lawfully lived. And where that comes in, you can have multiple residents as a citizen of the United States. Let's say you own a small trucking company and you do coast-to-coast continental truck driving, okay? So you have a place in Chicago, one in Memphis, you have one in Los Angeles, and one up in Chicago. So you have all these places that are your residence, but which one is your domicile? That's the one you call home.
So there you go. I apologize because I know I had said early on about getting to Gad, but I'm going to do that on a separate video. And I'm going to shut this one down here because, like I said, my intent was not to get into this, diaspora war that everybody talks about. And that's not the purpose of me doing this video. I'm just pointing out how things are being misused and they're doing it on purpose. And this is to spite Jake that we're here. There's a video I meant to do, this was last year, last summer as a matter of fact, of a so-called black woman down, I think it was in South Carolina. She was she was in local politics there where she was. I can't remember her title. But she gave a speech and she was talking about, hey, she's for her people. And she was talking about all the bullshit that, I believe she brought up the Democratic Party. And about the argument was who built what and, all this. And this, Caucasoid Democrat, in her rebuttal, said immigrants. And that's the thing here because, no, you got to understand, and you have to go back. And there's a great book that I have that I got, many years ago. It's called, The Great Mississippi Flood of 1927 and How It Changed America. I believe that's the whole title. And it was who was the author? Was it John M. Barry? And he had residence here in D.C. and also in Houston, I believe. But that book is, it's a good read. All right, but it's these people just don't want to admit. All right, and if they could, and it looks like they're trying to erase everything. If you're hiding and trying to do keep people from reading the actual history, you're actually telling on yourself, and you're making people more curious. Well, what the fuck are they trying to hide? All right. Now, a lot of people of a certain persuasion, Caucasian that is, they don't like hearing this stuff because, again, Habakkuk 2nd chapter, verse 16, it talks about, and we'll get it here real quick. All right. Let's see. Because this, let me get rid of this. Because there's nothing they can do about it. Hard as they try, it's out there now. This is Habakkuk 2 and 16. And it says, Thou art filled with shame for glory. They had a good run in portraying themselves, and that's like I usually like to say, they've enjoyed demigod status for the longest of times. All right. But now, when we use scriptures like Isaiah 47th chapter, all right, that skirt's been lifted and your shame is being seen. What is your shame? When we go to Obadiah, all right, in verses 10 on down, it tells you why these things are happening to you. It's because of what you did to your brother Jacob. All right, this is, let me finish this. Thou art filled with shame for glory. Drink thou also, and let thy foreskin be uncovered. The cup of the Most High's right hand shall be turned unto thee, and shameful spewing shall be on thy glory. Also Lamentations 4 and 20 and 21, or 21 and 22. It's 21 or 22 verses, I can't remember. But the last two verses of that chapter, all right, it's your turn. Edom. You're going to drink of that cup down to the dregs of it. All of it. All right. And it's happening right before our faces. All right. So there's no way to get out of this. But again, my next video will be on what the language and how it pertains to Gad. And it's like I say, remember that word domicile. But again, I'm going to cut this one short because for time limits, because if I go into that now, it's going to be well more than an hour video. So with that, once again, I'd like to say I hope whoever views this video has been edified. That's what we do here at Great Millstone. And I'd like to encourage you to remain circumspect out here. All right, keep your eyes and ears open. All right, so with that, until the next video, hey, shalom.